Commander Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of the Orbital Defense Station Artemis, her dark eyes fixed on the peculiar formation of alien vessels hanging at the edge of lunar orbit, the Andromedan ships, if you could call the crystalline structures ships, had maintained their unusual distance for the past 72 hours, refusing to approach any closer despite repeated diplomatic invitations. "They're doing it again," Lieutenant James Rodriguez said, joining her at the window. He handed her a tablet displaying the latest sensor readings. "Every time we send out a shuttle for routine maintenance, they back away another 1,000 kilometers." Sarah studied the data, her brow furrowing. The Andromedans were supposed to be the most advanced civilization humanity had encountered since achieving faster-than-light travel. Their empire spanned 3 neighboring galaxies, yet here they were, treating Earth's orbit like it was contaminated with some deadly plague. "Pull up the historical data from their visits to other worlds," she ordered, her fingers dancing across the tablet's surface. The holographic display expanded between them, showing a comparative analysis of Andromedan first contact protocols across 50 different civilizations. "That can't be right," James muttered, leaning closer to the display. "They normally maintain a standard orbital distance of 5,000 kilometers during first contact procedures. With us, they're keeping a minimum distance of 50,000 kilometers." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, despite the station's carefully regulated temperature. "And look at their shield configurations." She zoomed in on the energy readings from the nearest Andromedan vessel. "They're running at maximum power. These aren't diplomatic protocols. They're treating this like a containment operation." The command center's door hissed open, and Dr. Maya Patel, the station's xenobiologist, hurried in. Her usually neat lab coat was wrinkled, and her hair was escaping its tight bun. Sure signs she'd been pulling another all-nighter in the lab. "Commander, you need to see this," she said, slightly out of breath. "I've been analyzing the atmospheric samples they requested from Earth. They're not just studying our civilization. They're studying our entire biosphere. And their reactions, they're not displaying scientific curiosity. They're showing fear." Sarah turned away from the window, giving the scientist her full attention. "Fear? Of what?" "Of everything." Maya projected her own data alongside the tactical display. "Look at their environmental suits when they finally agreed to that brief meeting on the neutral station. They're not designed for protection against pathogens or radiation. They're built to withstand what they consider extreme conditions, conditions that we consider normal." The pieces started falling into place in Sarah's mind. She remembered the Andromedan ambassador's reaction when she casually mentioned Earth's seasonal temperature variations. The alien had literally changed color, its crystalline structure vibrating in what their xenologists later identified as extreme distress. "Show me their stellar cartography data," Sarah commanded. The holographic display shifted, showing a map of known space. Andromedan-controlled worlds lit up in a soft blue glow, forming vast networks of inhabited systems. But there was something odd about their pattern. James saw it too. They only colonize worlds within a narrow band of environmental parameters. Gravity between 0.8 and 1.1 Earth normal, temperature variations of less than 10 degrees Celsius, minimal tectonic activity, stable atmospheric composition. "Exactly," Maya cut in. "And Earth. We're what they call a crucible world. Our gravity fluctuates due to our moon's influence. Our temperature can swing by 40 degrees in a single day. Our atmosphere is a volatile mix of gases that would be lethal to most species. Our planet's crust is constantly moving, creating earthquakes and volcanic activity. And that's not even considering our background radiation levels." Sarah felt a laugh bubble up in her throat. "So they're not keeping their distance because they think we're primitive or dangerous. They're keeping their distance because they think our entire solar system is lethal." "It gets better," Maya said, pulling up more data. "Remember those tissue samples they requested? They just sent back their analysis. According to their Biological Sciences Division, Human cellular structure is impossibly resilient. Our ability to repair radiation damage, adapt to pressure changes, and survive temperature extremes is completely outside their understanding of evolutionary possibilities. The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. Earth wasn't just another world to the Andromedans. It was a horror story, a planet that should, by their understanding of science, be completely inhospitable to life. And humans weren't just another species. We were organisms that had evolved to thrive in conditions that would kill most galactic life forms instantly. "Well," James finally said, breaking the silence, "I guess that explains why they nearly had a diplomatic incident when we offered to host their delegation on Earth." Sarah nodded, her mind racing with the implications. "We need to inform command immediately. This changes everything about our diplomatic approach." She paused, looking back at the distant Andromedan ships. "But first, I think we should power down our defense systems. The last thing we want is for them to think we're about to unleash what they probably consider biological weapons, ourselves, on their empire." As the three of them began preparing their report, Sarah couldn't help but smile at the irony. Humanity had spent centuries wondering if we'd be strong enough to compete with alien civilizations, never considering that we might have evolved in conditions so extreme that the rest of the galaxy would consider us the equivalent of space monsters. The laboratory aboard Orbital Defense Station Artemis hummed with activity as Dr. Maya Patel and her team worked to understand the full implications of their discovery. Holographic displays filled the air with cascading data streams, comparing human biological systems with the Andromedan research database they'd been granted access to. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Kai Yamamoto said, manipulating a 3D model of human cellular structure alongside alien comparisons. "Look at our mitochondrial density compared to standard galactic life forms. We're practically nuclear reactors by their standards." Maya nodded, her attention fixed on her own display showing environmental tolerance ranges. The data painted an increasingly extraordinary picture of humanity's place in the galaxy. What they had always considered normal was, by galactic standards, extreme to the point of impossibility. "Commander Chen, you need to see this," Maya called out as Sarah entered the lab. The commander had dark circles under her eyes, evidence of the long hours everyone had been pulling since their initial discovery. "We've completed our comparative analysis of basic human capabilities against the galactic standard." Sarah walked over to the central display, where Maya began highlighting key points. "Let's start with something simple: temperature tolerance. The average galactic species can handle a temperature range of about 10 degrees Celsius before requiring environmental protection. Humans, we routinely survive temperature swings of 40 degrees or more. There are people living in places like Siberia and the Sahara Desert that would be classified as extreme hazard zones by Andromedan standards. That's just the beginning," Kai added, pulling up more data. "Our atmospheric pressure tolerance is off their charts. Most species can handle a variance of about 5% before experiencing severe distress. Humans can survive pressure changes of up to 20% with minimal discomfort. Deep-sea divers regularly exceed what they consider lethal pressure thresholds." The commander's eyes widened as she processed the information. "And our gravity tolerance." Maya grinned, pulling up another chart. "That's where it gets really interesting. The Andromedans evolved on a world with about 0.8 Earth gravity. Most spacefaring species come from similar environments. Our gravity would crush them. Even more impressive is our ability to function in variable gravity conditions. The fact that we can go from Earth gravity to 0 G and back without permanent physiological damage. They consider that almost impossible." Lieutenant Rodriguez joined them, bringing up the latest diplomatic communications on a side screen. "That explains these transmissions we just decoded. They're not just afraid of us visiting their worlds. They're terrified we might try to colonize what they consider deadly environments, planets they've written off as uninhabitable." "Show me," Sarah ordered, moving to the diplomatic feed. The translated text scrolled across the screen, Internal communications between Andromedan ships. Species designation human demonstrates environmental adaptability beyond all known parameters. Threat assessment, extreme. Potential colonization range, unlimited. Recommendation, implementation of containment protocols. They think we're going to accidentally take over the galaxy, Kai said, shaking his head in amazement. Simply because we can live in places they consider lethal. Maya pulled up another dataset, this one focusing on human cellular repair mechanisms. Our radiation resistance is particularly concerning to them. What we consider background radiation on Earth would be lethal to most species without heavy shielding. Our DNA repair capabilities are so efficient that they initially classified us as an engineered species. They couldn't believe we evolved naturally. Sarah leaned against a console, absorbing the implications, so every time we invited them to Earth, we've been essentially asking them to visit what they consider a death world. Maya finished. The atmospheric composition alone would kill most of them. Oxygen is highly corrosive by their standards. Our nitrogen levels would create toxic pressures in their bodies. Even our background magnetic field is stronger than anything they've evolved to handle. But it goes beyond just our world, Kai added, expanding his display to show potential human colonization zones based on their tolerances. By their standards, we could survive on roughly 90% of planets they consider uninhabitable. We're not just tough, we're practically indestructible. Lieutenant Rodriguez whistled softly. No wonder they're keeping their distance. We must seem like something out of their horror stories. Creatures that evolved in a cosmic disaster zone, who drink corrosive liquids and breathe toxic gases for fun. Speaking of which, Maya said, pulling up yet another chart, wait until you see their analysis of human recreational activities. When they learned about extreme sports, they classified them as deliberate suicide attempts, before realizing we do them for fun. The concept of voluntarily exposing ourselves to environmental stresses for entertainment is completely alien to them. Sarah straightened up, her military training kicking in as she assessed the strategic implications. We need to adjust our entire diplomatic approach. Every time we've tried to demonstrate our peaceful intentions by inviting them closer, we've actually been threatening them with what they consider lethal environmental exposure. Agreed, Maya said. But there's something else we need to consider. She brought up a galactic map, highlighting potential human expansion zones. We're not just capable of surviving in their death worlds, we're actually better adapted to them than to the worlds they consider paradise. The planets they fight wars over, we'd find them boring. The territories they consider worthless, those are exactly the kinds of places where humanity would thrive. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They had discovered something far more significant than just why the Andromedans feared them. They had uncovered humanity's unique place in the galaxy, not as conquerors or warriors, but as pioneers capable of thriving in environments that other species could barely imagine surviving. The neutral meeting station hung in space exactly halfway between the human and Andromedan fleets. Commander Sarah Chen watched through the observation window as the crystalline form of Ambassador Zilix entered the chamber, encased in what she now understood to be an extremely reinforced environmental suit. The ambassador's support staff followed, their crystalline bodies refracting light in patterns that the xenologists had identified as indicating extreme anxiety. "Welcome, Ambassador," Sarah said, carefully maintaining the 20-meter distance their visitors had insisted upon. "We appreciate your willingness to meet with us following our recent discoveries." The ambassador's translation crystal pulsed with soft light as it converted their electromagnetic communications into human speech. "Commander Chen, Dr. Patel, we understand you have reached certain conclusions about our behavior toward your species." Maya stepped forward, holding a data tablet. "Yes, Ambassador. We've analyzed your biological data and compared it with our own research. We now understand why you've been so cautious in your approach to Earth." The ambassador's crystalline structure shifted, creating a pattern that their cultural database identified as diplomatic discomfort. Then you understand why we must insist on maintaining the current quarantine protocols around your solar system. What we don't understand, Sarah interjected, is why you didn't simply tell us from the beginning. We've been inadvertently threatening you with every invitation to visit Earth. The crystalline surface of Zolix's environmental suit rippled, a sign of what might have been embarrassment. How does one tell a species that their very existence violates fundamental principles of biology? That their homeworld should be, by all known science, utterly inhospitable to intelligent life? Perhaps, Maya suggested, by starting with the fact that what we consider normal would be lethal to most galactic species. We're scientists, Ambassador. We understand adaptation and evolutionary pressure. The ambassador's crystalline form pulsed with a new pattern, one their database didn't recognize. Dr. Patel, your species casually inhabits environments that would shatter our bodies. Your children play in conditions we would classify as weapons grade. Your atmospheric composition alone would dissolve our crystalline structures in seconds. Sarah pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's various biomes. We've reviewed your classification of Earth as a crucible world, but surely there must be other species that evolved in similar conditions. None. The ambassador's response was immediate. In 3 galaxies, spanning millions of worlds, we have never encountered a species that evolved in conditions remotely approaching yours. The closest comparison would be the extremophile bacteria found in deep space environments. Maya exchanged glances with Sarah before continuing. And our biological capabilities, our cellular repair mechanisms, our radiation resistance, impossible by all known models of evolution, Zilix stated. Your ability to repair radiation damage alone should require technological intervention. Instead, you do it naturally, continuously. Your bones can support weights that would shatter crystalline life forms. Your muscles can generate forces that would tear apart most known biological structures. And yet here we are, Sarah said softly, a product of Earth's evolutionary pressures. The ambassador's form shifted again, creating patterns of deep concern. Indeed, which brings us to the primary reason for this meeting. Your species' natural adaptations make you capable of surviving in approximately 90% of what we classify as deadly environments. Environments that make up roughly 60% of all known planets. You're worried we'll expand into these worlds, Sarah realized. That will colonize planets you've written off as uninhabitable. Commander, Zilix's translation crystal pulsed with intensity. Your species could potentially colonize more worlds than the entire Andromedan Empire currently inhabits, not through superior technology or military might, but simply because you can survive where we cannot. Your children could play on worlds that would kill our strongest warriors instantly. Maya stepped closer to the holographic display, bringing up their comparative environmental tolerance data. But that also means we're not competing for the same resources. The worlds you consider paradise would be too stable, too unchanging for us. We've evolved to thrive on challenge and adaptation. The ambassador's crystalline structure vibrated in what they had learned to recognize as surprise. You would willingly choose to colonize worlds we consider lethal. Ambassador, Sarah smiled. We already live on one. Earth isn't just our home. It's the forge that made us who we are. Every adaptation you find so terrifying is what allowed us to survive and thrive. We're not a threat to your empire because we don't want your worlds. We want the ones you can't use. The patterns within Zilix's crystalline form shifted rapidly, processing this new perspective. This changes the entire framework of our analysis. We had assumed your species would seek to expand into what we consider habitable zones. No, Maya said firmly. We'll seek out the challenges, the worlds with extreme temperatures, variable gravity, intense radiation, the crucible worlds, as you call them. It's not just about survival for us. It's about testing our limits, pushing boundaries. Sarah watched as the ambassador's support staff communicated among themselves in rapid pulses of light. Their patterns suggested intense discussion, perhaps even debate. Finally, Zilix turned back to them. Your species continues to defy our understanding, the ambassador said. You not only survive in conditions we consider lethal, you actively seek them out. You view as opportunities what we see as insurmountable barriers. Perhaps this is not the disaster we feared, but rather an opportunity we never considered. 1 month after the diplomatic breakthrough, the observation deck of Research Station Delta hummed with activity. Through the reinforced windows, the harsh surface of Venus stretched out below, its sulfuric acid clouds swirling in eternal storms. Commander Sarah Chen stood beside Ambassador Xylix, both watching as Dr. Maya Patel suited up for what the Andromedans had termed the impossible demonstration. Your protective gear seems inadequate for the conditions, Xylix observed, their crystalline form vibrating with concern. The ambassador's own environmental suit had been tripled in strength just to survive in the observation station's human normal atmosphere. This is standard Venus surface operations gear, Sarah explained, helping Maya check her seals. We've been conducting research here for decades. The ambassador's translation crystal flickered rapidly. The surface conditions include temperatures that would melt our structures, pressures that would crush our strongest vessels, and an atmosphere of corrosive acid. Your species performs research there, routinely. We have 3 permanent research bases on the surface, Maya said, her voice slightly muffled through her helmet. The real challenge isn't the conditions, it's maintaining the equipment. The acid plays havoc with our sensors. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice came through the comm system. Survey team is ready, Commander. Atmospheric processors are functioning normally, and all backup systems are green. Sarah nodded to Maya. Remember, this is just a standard survey run. 2 hours maximum surface time. Standard for us. Maya smiled. Though I think our guests might disagree with that definition. She gestured to the dozen Andromedan observers, their crystalline forms clustered as far from the airlock as possible. The descent vehicle dropped through Venus's thick atmosphere, its heat shields glowing as they dispersed energy that would have vaporized most alien vessels. Maya's team moved with practiced efficiency, their suits barely registering the extreme conditions that their audience considered utterly lethal. Approaching Site Gamma, Maya reported, her voice clear despite the howling winds outside. Beginning sample collection sequence. Through the observation deck's monitors, they watched as the human team worked on the Venusian surface. They moved through pressure that would crush most species, handled materials hot enough to melt standard alloys, and casually filtered an atmosphere that the Andromedans classified as weapons-grade corrosive. Impossible, one of the Andromedan scientists whispered, their crystalline form flickering with patterns of disbelief. They're treating conditions that would destroy our strongest exploration drones as mere inconveniences. That's nothing, Sarah said, pulling up additional data on a nearby screen. Wait until you see our deep-sea research stations on Earth. We regularly conduct studies at pressures that would implode your vessels instantly. Ambassador Xylix's form shifted in what they'd learned to recognize as academic interest. You mentioned such facilities before, but we assumed they were automated operations. Automated. Maya's laugh crackled through the comm. We have permanent crew rotations. Some of our marine biologists spend months at those depths. The biggest complaint is usually the food quality, not the crushing pressure. The Andromedan observers huddled closer together, their patterns indicating increasing agitation as Maya's team collected samples from Venus's surface. Each casual movement, each routine procedure, demonstrated capabilities that defied their understanding of biological limitations. Commander, Maya's voice came through again. We're picking up some interesting mineral formations near the site. Permission to extend the survey by 30 minutes. Before Sarah could respond, Ambassador Xylix interrupted, their translation crystal pulsing rapidly. Your team wishes to remain in those conditions. Longer, voluntarily. It's a research opportunity. Maya replied simply. The conditions are well within our safety margins. The ambassador's crystalline structure vibrated in what might have been resignation. Your species continues to redefine our understanding of safety margins. Permission granted from the observation team. As they watched the survey team continue their work, Lieutenant Rodriguez brought up another display showing potential human exploration zones throughout the galaxy. Worlds marked in red were those the Andromedans had classified as lethal environment. Do not approach. They made up more than half the habitable-sized planets in known space. Each of these worlds, Sarah explained, represents an opportunity for us. Places where humanity can expand without competing with existing civilizations. Environments that would kill most species, but where we could build thriving colonies. Ambassador Zilix studied the map, their crystalline form shifting through patterns of deep thought. Your species would willingly colonize worlds we consider death zones, not from necessity, but from choice. It's who we are, Sarah said softly. We evolved in conditions that should have prevented intelligent life from developing. Every step of our evolution was shaped by surviving what you consider impossible conditions. We don't just endure these environments. We adapt to them, learn from them, make them our own. The ambassador's translation crystal pulsed with new understanding. Then perhaps our initial fear was misplaced. We saw your adaptive capabilities as a threat, never considering that they might instead be the key to exploring parts of the galaxy we could never reach. On the surface below, Maya's team continued their work, oblivious to the profound impact their routine survey was having on galactic politics. Each sample they collected, each casual adjustment to their equipment, demonstrated humanity's unique place in the cosmos, not as conquerors or competitors, but as pioneers of the impossible. 6 months after the Venus demonstration, the newly constructed Galactic Cooperation Center orbited Earth at the exact distance the Andromedans had originally maintained out of fear. Now that same distance served as a compromise between human and alien environmental needs. Commander Sarah Chen stood at its central viewing window, Earth gleaming below, as she reviewed the latest reports with Ambassador Zilix. The first joint expedition exceeded all expectations, Sarah said, gesturing to the holographic display between them. Our survey teams were able to explore environments your people couldn't approach, while your scientists provided invaluable analysis from orbit. The ambassador's crystalline form shimmered with what they now recognized as enthusiasm. Indeed, your team's exploration of the methane seas on Proxima b has provided data we never thought possible to obtain. Though I must admit, watching your researchers voluntarily dive into liquid methane still triggers our danger protocols. Just wait until they start suggesting extreme sports locations, Lieutenant Rodriguez quipped as he joined them. Carrying fresh data from the latest expedition, I heard some of the survey team talking about methane surfing. The ambassador's form flickered in what might have been either amusement or horror. They still hadn't quite figured out the difference. Your species' recreational activities remain a source of both fascination and concern. The concept of voluntarily seeking out adverse conditions for fun continues to challenge our understanding. Dr. Maya Patil entered the chamber, her excitement visible even before she reached them. The results from the gamma radiation belt exploration on Jupiter are in, she announced, pulling up new data streams. We've confirmed stable organic compounds in environments that should theoretically strip atomic bonds apart. The implications for life in extreme conditions are revolutionary. More importantly, Sarah added, we've proven that our species can safely operate in conditions that would destroy most exploration equipment. The Andromedan Empire's list of impossible research sites is becoming our roadmap for expansion. Ambassador Zilix's translation crystal pulsed thoughtfully. When we first encountered your species, we feared your abilities would lead to accidental conquest, that you would unintentionally overwhelm our civilizations simply by being able to survive where we cannot. We never considered that your adaptations might instead open doors we thought forever closed. Maya nodded, manipulating the holographic display to show the latest galactic survey map. Worlds once marked in warning red now glowed with the blue of human exploration potential. We're not competing for the same resources or environments. We're literally expanding into spaces that would kill most other species. It's not invasion. It's exploration of the unwanted. More than that, The ambassador's crystal pulsed. "You're gathering knowledge that benefits all spacefaring races. Your ability to directly study phenomena we can only observe from a safe distance is advancing galactic science at an unprecedented rate." Lieutenant Rodriguez pulled up another display, this one showing the latest diplomatic agreements. The quarantine zone has been officially redesignated as a cooperative research space. Any species capable of surviving extreme conditions is welcome to join human exploration teams. Though so far, Sarah smiled, we're still the only ones volunteering for methane sea diving. The ambassador's form shifted, and what they'd learned was their equivalent of rueful acknowledgement. "Your species has forced us to reconsider many of our fundamental assumptions. We thought we understood the limits of biological adaptation, the boundaries of possible evolution. Earth was classified as a death world, a planet that should have been hostile to intelligent life. Instead, it created a species that thrives on challenges we considered insurmountable." Maya brought up images from their latest joint missions, humans working in environments that would kill most species instantly, gathering data that had been thought impossible to obtain, expanding the boundaries of known science. "We're not space monsters or death worlders," she said softly. "We're the pioneers of the impossible, the explorers of the extremes." "And perhaps," Xylix added, their crystal pulsing with new understanding, "that is exactly what the galaxy needed. Not despite your adaptations, but because of them. You see barriers as challenges, death worlds as opportunities, and impossible conditions as Tuesday morning." Sarah turned back to the window, watching as a human survey ship prepared to depart for another impossible mission. "We spent so long wondering if we'd be strong enough to compete with alien civilizations," she mused. "We never considered that our real strength would be our ability to go where others cannot, to thrive where others fear to tread." The room fell quiet as they all contemplated the view. Earth hung below them, beautiful and deadly, a crucible that had forged humanity into something unique in the galaxy. Not conquerors, not monsters, but pioneers of the extreme, explorers of the impossible, turning death worlds into new frontiers. "To think," Ambassador Xylix said finally, "we once feared the Sol system because its inhabitants could survive conditions we considered lethal. Now we celebrate that same capability as the key to unlocking the galaxy's greatest mysteries." "Fear or celebration?" Sarah replied, watching the survey ship disappear into FTL. "It all depends on perspective. We don't want to conquer your paradise worlds. We're too busy exploring our own versions of paradise, out there in the extremes where few dare to venture." The ambassador's crystal pulsed one final time. "And perhaps that, Commander Chen, is the greatest revelation of all. In fearing what you could survive, we almost missed discovering what you could achieve."